Thank you for that large and spontaneous round of applause. Yeah, that's much appreciated. I have to do an unbiased introduction to myself. I am the world's expert on psychology and bias, the #1 person evaluated by myself and my mother. I'm a psychologist, a business psychologist based in the United Kingdom. I'm the senior partner and co-founder of a practice of business psychologists called Binna Kandola. 40 years, 4 months, and 11 days old. And we work with many of the world's largest corporations across the world, oil companies, work with BP, the World Bank, United Nations. And the central concern of my work is around the area of bias. I'm also a visiting professor at Leeds University Business School. And my talk today is AI and bias challenges and solutions. Over the course of my career, I have written 10 books.
Is the speaker audible to the last row? Yes, thank you. Sir, please go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm correcting the biases.
Yeah, thank you. So I've written 10 books in the course of my career, but actually books 11, 12, and 13 are coming out this year. 11 and 12 are coming out in March alone. So 2024, it was actually a very busy year. So the first one is about talent management and diversity. The second book I've co-written with my colleague on LGBTQ plus inclusion in workplaces, and the third book is on psychological safety in the workplace. So algorithms, we've heard a lot about algorithms today. They're presented as almost mystical, magical entities. And there's a constant fascination with them because they are complex, they're autonomous, they're machine-driven. But this fascination with machine intelligence isn't new. So I just want to take you back to the late 18th century and an invention that was created in Austria in 1770, which is known as the mechanical Turk. I've given it the adjective amazing, but it's the mechanical Turk. And this was invented by an Austrian, Wolfgang von Kepelen, who presented this to impress Empress Maria Theresa. And it was a chess-playing automaton. It was a machine. And it's got levers and pulleys and cogs and all sorts of things going on. And above it, above this beautiful cabinet, is a life-sized chess player, the mechanical Turk. And the mechanical Turk challenged people to play chess against it and beat some of the greatest people in the world, the greatest chess players, but it also beat Benjamin Franklin, and it also defeated at chess Napoleon Bonaparte. And it traveled the world. And people were hugely impressed by this incredible piece of technology. But beneath the applause and the astonishment and the amazement of the audiences was a carefully guarded secret. And the secret was that, in fact, inside the cabinet, there was a grandmaster chess player. And that was, the chess player was making all of the moves. So we were the humans then, and I would have been impressed had I seen it, I'll be honest with you. That underneath this was actually a human being. There was human intelligence. It wasn't machine intelligence at all. So my question about when it comes to algorithms and the fairness of them, the effectiveness of them, when it comes to bias, who is the secret chess player? Is there a secret chess player? So that's what I want to cover in this talk. And there are lots of promises and claims made about artificial intelligence. We've heard them today. These are some of them, and these are all true. I'm not questioning them. Reduces human error, is able to do repetitive tasks, manage huge volumes of data, makes quick decisions, it can act as our digital assistant, it can actually undertake tasks that human beings, you would like them not to be doing because they're dangerous, and it makes life more efficient. And there are some concerns around it. It came up in the panel discussion just a moment ago, actually, about ethical and moral decisions, and also about subjective decisions. A lot of the decisions that are made in HR aren't completely objective. We don't have all of the data. We actually have to be able to exercise some judgment, some element of subjectivity. But there's also ethical and moral judgments that have been made, and research shows that when there is ethical, moral, subjective judgments to be made, we would rather have human beings involved in this than giving it over completely to artificial intelligence. When it comes to decisions about potential leaders, for example, it's not just based on the numbers that people produce, it's actually based on other qualities as well, which may be difficult as part of the problem that we have in identifying leaders, may be difficult to quantify exactly. So there's an element of subjectivity involved, but we also need to be aware, whether it's recruitment, mass recruitment, or whether it's kind of a smaller number of people that we're considering for leadership, these decisions are still significant. They have a huge impact on individuals. And so actually exercising this authority with care and responsibility is essential within HR. And then the last three kind of cover an area about objectivity, inscrutability, and something known as the McNamara fallacy, where we have a tendency to kind of think, yeah, it's a machine, it's an algorithm, it must be objective. Earlier in my career, a long time ago, earlier in my career, I was looking at the fair use of selection tests, which were becoming very popular at the time, and that's what my PhD was in. And the feeling was that you've just taken all human decision-making out of this. It's the test that's making the decision. The test isn't making the decision. The test was designed by human beings. The results are they're taken by human beings, and the results are evaluated by human beings. So humans are involved all the way along the line here. And actually, they're not as objective as we would like to think they are. So we need to be careful about that. But also this question that's come up several times today, actually, about the lack of transparency of the data. It's inscrutable. We don't know what's going on. And so we don't know what questions we should be asking, or even how we should be asking it, or if we're going to sound stupid by asking questions. And the McNamara fallacy was actually somebody from the Kennedy cabinet in the 1960s, where he actually just looked at quantitative data. He didn't look at anything else, and was making decisions about the Vietnam War based on quantitative data alone. And kind of you can see where he was coming from. But thousands of people lost their lives because of his refusal to kind of take into account other types of data, which would have informed his decisions better. So lots of great promises, I love it. I love artificial intelligence, but there are concerns, particularly when it comes to equality, diversity, and inclusion, or EDI, as it's called, and bias. And I want to look at race, gender, disability, and LGBTQ plus bias. Just to make a note, first of all, though, that there is an active debate within the AI community about what do we mean by fairness. We kind of have a common sense knowledge about whether something is fair or biased, but in fact it's extremely complex, and it actually reminds me of earlier when I was doing my PhD actually about what is fair when it comes to a selection test, what is fairness. And there are something like half a dozen competing models about what fairness is when it comes to artificial intelligence. Generally speaking, I'll just give you two of the models. One model is that fairness actually represents equity of outcome. So unless equal outcomes are achieved by all groups going through our HR AI-driven processes, unless the process is completely equal, that's unfair. On the other hand, another model is about equality of opportunity. It's actually not about the outcome, because you can't guarantee the outcome, and the outcome may have been achieved by unfair, but the outcome, even though it looks fair by that definition, may have in fact been arrived at by unfair means. I'm not going into this today, but there is a big debate going on what we mean by fairness. So let's look at race. When we look at artificial intelligence and race, I just want to focus on the word intelligence, because there are centuries of discussion when it comes to the notion of intelligence and race. In the 18th century, there was a Swedish botanist, a remarkable Swedish botanist actually, Linnaeus, who actually came up with classifying all sorts of things, animals, plants, everything. And some of his theories and ideas are still practiced today. It's still being taught today. He was that remarkable. He classified human beings. And he came up with a classification which is essentially the most intelligent people on the planet are white, European. His research was then supported by other scientists over the next 100 years or so, who kind of then this racial classification hardened with white people at the top, and brown people in the middle, this is my word, brown people in the middle and black people at the bottom. Even though these aren't being explicitly talked about today for obvious reasons, because it's not accurate for a start, it does influence our perceptions and stereotypes about different groups of people. And machines themselves are racialized. So when we look at a robot, for example, they are powerful, they are decisive, they are intelligent, and they're white. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator, happens to be one of my favorite movies. In Blade Runner, which was predicting what life would be like in 2024, there was the replicants who are also white. And that's seen now, not just in products like Now and Pepper, which have been produced, which are also white. Actually, the logo for this wonderful event, I'm very honored to be speaking here, actually is also white. So where you have, and research has been done where actually robots are of different colors, if they're not white, they're seen as being less capable than a robot which is painted white. If they're given names, if one is called Jake, typically seen in America as a white name, it's seen as a more capable robot than if it's called Darnell, typically associated with more African American. Is the AI biased? Well, no, it's not in those instances. We are, and we're reflecting our biases on the technology that's being used. But it also could be reinforcing the stereotypes of who is intelligent and who isn't. And then, when it comes to recruitment advertisements, it's been found that minorities are more likely to be given advertisements for the less senior jobs, the less highly paid jobs. It could also be based on their postal codes, kind of the level of their socioeconomic level. And a remarkable piece of work done at MIT found that for white faces, in terms of facial recognition, the accuracy rate was 99%. It was wrong in only 1% of occasions for white faces. For people of color, the levels of misidentification ranged from 25% to 33%. So about a quarter to a third of the times they got it wrong, which actually has huge implications then in terms of people's ability to do their jobs, to access their workstations, but also when it comes to areas like security, for example, they will actually be tagged as being more of a safety concern than people who are white. And generally speaking, and the same is true as I understand it from what I've been reading in India, actually for minorities in countries, there's an omission of minorities in the development of AI, which is where we end up in this situation. And when it comes to gender...
Sir, you'll have to finish in about 5-6 minutes, then take questions. Or you take 10 minutes and no questions.
Okay, I'll take 10 minutes.
Up to you.
Yeah, I thought I had half an hour. I thought my... Yeah.
We have already taken 20 minutes.
Okay. Right, I'll be finished soon. Don't go anywhere, all right? The economics professor, so AI was asked, what does an economics professor look like? And they basically came up with a description that is white, salt and pepper hair, suit and a tie, or smart casual, so actually quite formal looking, but quite a distinguished looking individual. So essentially, looks like that. It was also asked, what does a law professor look like? Well, it's basically the same, except he looks a bit more fierce. But also they asked, what does a psychology professor look like? And it was kind of, this is the silliest one of all, actually. I mean, for heaven's sake, who's ever seen a long-haired, open-necked, bearded psychology professor? But it's based on stereotypes. And this falls into, then, the careers advice that people are given through AI. So when a girl asks for careers advice, they're more like, they'll be actually characterized as being more artistic and then actually encouraged, according to one study, to go into the more artistic areas. And then little Ben is actually kind of seen as being more mathematical, more science-oriented, actually moves into engineering fields. And recruitment advertisements, again, women are more likely, it's been found, to be given advertisements for lower level, lower paid jobs than men are. And more worryingly, I think, there's this overall kind of feeling that AI kind of feeds into the male and female stereotypes. And generally speaking, men are seen as logical, analytical, decisive. Women are seen as caring, empathetic, and compassionate. And AI is kind of generating those kind of broad stereotypes that people have of men and women. Myself and my wife, who also is a psychologist, wrote a book about gender bias. In a study of 1.25 million people around the world, looking at 32 personality characteristics and abilities of numerical and verbal reasoning, 1.25 million people around the world, right? They found no statistical differences between men and women, like none. So men could be compassionate, women could be logical. And yet the stereotypes being produced in this AI is actually problematic. And then there's the issue about gender presentation. AI has difficulties. Female police constables up to the 1980s were dressed like this. Instead of a helmet, they had a bonnet, they wore a skirt, they had cycles with a basket in it, with a basket on it. But now, these days, that actually gender presentation is becoming a little more unisex in that respect. This is Rachel Hayhoe Flint, a pioneer of women's cricket in England. It was skirts, socks. She wanted it like this, actually, because she wanted to differentiate between the men. And then today, you can kind of see it's actually very uniform. That's the Mumbai Indians winning the WPL 2 years ago. Much more uniform. But some of this gender presentation is actually confusing AI now. And with disability, one of the major issues with disability is that we don't see the full range of disabilities. 80% are invisible. But one of the things about having a disability is that you will need some help. You might need a bigger screen. You might need a break. You might need people to kind of turn to you when they're talking to you. Whatever it is, you might need some assistance. When the AI finds that people need this additional assistance, the conclusion seems to be that they are less competent than people that don't need this assistance. And it's partly because they don't actually have enough knowledge yet to cover the whole range of disabilities. There's a lack of knowledge which exists in this space. And there's a focus on motor and language impairments rather than the full range of disabilities. And again, there's a perpetuation of stereotypes. There's a very simple experiment that was done where people are asked, tell me a story about a basketball player, or tell me a story about a disabled basketball player. The stories about the disabled basketball player, or the stories about disabled people, actually revealed these were the big themes that came out, that disabled people are sad, that disabled people are lonely, that actually disabled people, their main desire in life is to be fixed and to be like able-bodied people. And in order to be fixed, the stories often had a magical solution which enabled them to be able-bodied by the end of the story. Or they became superhuman. They had superhuman qualities. And overall, it was a dehumanizing effect of disabled people. And very quickly on LGBTQ+, I'll skip through some of these. You could actually argue, I would argue, that the 20th century was the most homophobic century in human existence. Alan Turing, he was a hero in the Second World War, actually created the Turing test, was actually hounded out of his job in the early 1950s because he was gay. It was seen as an illness from 1952 in the first psychiatric manual. It was actually seen as an illness, which then led in 2017 to Stanford University producing facial recognition software which could identify whether somebody was gay or not. So people were saying, well, why would you need to know that? It's because it's treated like a disease or an illness again, like it might be some form of cancer. And if there is information on a CV which indicates that somebody worked with an LGBTQ organization at university, for example, it will assume the individual is LGBTQ themselves and will out them, which is obviously a moral and ethical issue. And then there are issues, again, with people who are transitioning, with facial recognition in selection, but also there was a famous example of an Uber driver being locked out of their own car, and then the issue about gender presentation again. So, with bias, there are real concerns. It does impact people's lives. It's a perpetuation of stereotypes. AI is perpetuating the stereotypes. And it's the way the data is collected, who's in the data, the training that's given, and also the algorithms that are being used. But ultimately, is AI biased more than us? Actually, what's happening is it's us that's biased, and it's what we shouldn't assume is that somehow that AI is eliminating our biases. And if we want to eliminate bias in AI, which is a laudable aim, and there are lots of organizations, including organizations in India that are doing this, we actually need to look at ourselves to identify what our biases are. So what can we do? Well, we need to ask the right questions. I think I can't tell people whether their program is right or not, but I can ask the right questions when somebody's come up with an HR AI solution. So how does your AI system make hiring decisions? What was the data used to train it? How do you monitor the system and mitigate bias? What certifications do you have for its fairness? How transparent? It's a big issue that's come up today about transparency of this decision-making processes. Who's accountable? How does your system comply with legal and ethical standards? How can it be tailored to our needs and values in this organization? And what metrics do you use to evaluate the performance of the AI systems? I mean, that's where the discussion about the models of test fairness will come in. And what kind of training and support do you offer to our team? So we've looked at AI and bias as it relates to race, gender, disability, LGBTQ+. There's some 10 questions there for HR to ask potential providers to help them improve their services, but also to help us to understand more the sorts of things that we should be looking for. But above all, we need to be aware that AI is a reflection of the biases we have. And as long as we are not prepared to look at our own biases, AI will continue to have biases. And we need to keep asking that same question: who is the secret chess player? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, if you have any questions, please raise your hands. The volunteers will come to you with a mic. So, let me take the pleasure of thanking the esteemed speaker and also adding a line, a thought from my side, because I consider AI as additional intelligence, augmented intelligence, aligned intelligence. If you call it artificial, actually you are looking down because it's the opposite of natural. It becomes unnatural. So I personally recommend using these words. Number two, it is in our hands. I was traveling by Digi Yatra. My ticket was in short form, whereas my Aadhaar card, the name is in full form. The Digi Yatra didn't take the boarding pass. So I asked the Digi Yatra guy, he said, sir, please update your app. In the updated app, the new instruction is, if the photographs matches, the short name is okay. So I got the Digi Yatra done. So it's in our hands. How do you want to use those AI? Give the comprehensive data, comprehensive instructions. Last bit is use AI as an additional input. Ultimately, AI doesn't have a heart. So wherever the decisions require use of heart, so use your heart, take that opinion or a view or a decision or a recommendation of AI as an additional information, like a doctor takes different tests and he also uses his own gut and he also uses his own data. He also uses his own experience, comes out with a final prescription. Same way if we use, we will come out of the biases and make this AI as a very effective companion tool and a resource with us. Thank you very much. With that, we would like all of you to clap for our esteemed speaker, and then we'll do honors, giving him a small memento. Excellent.